go-to-market alignment and working cross-functionally. All right, so first thing I just want to share with y'all is my opinion, but maybe you share it. Go-to-market is broken. And we're all sitting here in our organizations and, you know, it's on fire. And we're sitting there and saying, oh, that's all right. We can get around it. It's okay. Yeah, I'm fine. But we're not really fine. We're actually losing money when we let this broken go-to-market approach just stay broken. And so I want to share with you, before we jump in, you know, to this topic, I want to share with you some information here. First, though, in the chat, I want you to tell me exactly what Gary was asking. How are we defining GTM? Who is on the go-to-market team, in your opinion? How would you define GTM? Who's on a go-to-market team? Sales, marketing, customer success. All right. So I see marketing there. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Product. All right. Support, professional services. Good. All right. Excellent. We are all on the same page here. Marketing, sales, customer success, product, you know, certainly professional services and all of those folks, you know, are under that, or under the umbrella of customer success, or they usually sit somewhere in the organization. So that's the first place I want to just talk about, like, who's part of this go-to-market team, because sometimes when people talk about go-to-market, they'll just talk about sales and marketing and the pre-sales motion. But how we go to market is actually across all of our teams, right? And it's really how we all contribute that determines how we go to market. And who are we aligning with? So when we talk about go-to-market alignment, customers, exactly. So the go-to-market alignment requires us to not only be aligned internally, but we need to be aligned externally. If we're not aligned with the customer, we haven't done our job. And so it really is the way that we align internally and align externally to the customer. Think of it as a thread. That is the critical portion. That if we aren't going all the way there, then we're not going to make it as a company. And we also, I'm going to say, it's like we're stopping short. We're thinking internally. We're looking at our belly button. We're thinking about our company, when in fact we need to be thinking about the customer, and we need to think about that how we can organize ourselves in a customer-centric way, right? And that's what go-to-market alignment is about, is being a customer-centric company. Now, go-to-market alignment is important, as I mentioned earlier, because you lose money if you're not aligned, right? And so let's take a second and match the cost. We have cost to acquire a new customer, retain existing customer, cost to upsell, cross-sell, referral sell. Where do you think these costs, how do these costs align? I'll give you a big hint. It's right in this order. It's 5x cost. And this is on average. You would have to look at your own company to look what the customer acquisition cost is, right? I've seen 7x. I've even seen 14x in a company, right? But on average, you're looking at least 5x the cost to get a new customer in versus retaining a customer. Upselling is incrementally another half. Yeah, I know. Why is everyone laying off the CSMs if this is the case? But not everybody's thinking about these costs, even though this is generally known. I mean, you can get this information from ChatGPT, which is only updated up to 2021. This is well-known information, right? But still, we have companies that haven't done the work to be aligned. They're sitting in that room that's on fire, and they understand that they're losing customers, but they still want to spend the 5x to go get new customers rather than fix this process, which actually costs them a lot less. So when you take a look at this very, very tiny 0.1x, that is the incremental cost of the customer doing a referral, offering up a referral to then sell to a new customer. So once you've gone through the whole process of renewing and upselling and cross-selling to a customer, they're happy with you, turning them into an advocate and getting that referral sell from them is only 0.1x incremental cost, right? So that's on the cost side. Now, if we're looking at probability of revenue, all in the same order. So you look at 4x is how likely existing customers are going to be increasing revenue with you. If you're doing this right, if you're set up correctly, right? If you are aligned, right? And then you've got 1x for new prospects. You've got 0.75x is the likelihood of referrals. So that's pretty good, especially when you compare that the 0.5x is cold calls, right? 50-50 chance that a cold call is going to come through for giving increased revenue. And you compare that to something that's 8 times more likely, which is the existing customers. Now, I know that this is painful to you because you know this, but this is the kind of conversation that you need to have internally at your companies to be able to make the case, hey, the room's on fire, but let's fix this. Look at the benefit. Because when you compare what the potential revenue is versus what the potential costs are at the beginning and the end of these, right? This helps you make the case. Let's go fix this. And that's why I'm sharing this information, not to beat you over the head and make you feel worse, not to point out what your companies maybe don't do so well. Most companies don't do this very well. But if you give them this North Star of what it could be, then you can say, hey, let's fix this. All right. Now, where to focus? Think about, where does the customer lose trust? Because for every company, it can be a little different. Oftentimes, the pre-sales promise from marketing and sales and the post-sales delivery or the product don't match. That's the biggest sort of break. But even that can be more refined, right? There's certain things about the product that perhaps are overpromised, or even between marketing and sales, that can be broken. What happens though, if it's broken between marketing and sales, is the customer doesn't sign on, right? So then that's sort of their leaky bucket or in the funnel where it's leaking out, right? So then they try to fix that, right? Oh, good. Ty, I'm glad you're sharing some links there to some other resources. I was pretty quick in putting this together, so I didn't have additional resources to throw in today. But let's look at the most common challenges, right? Misrepresentation of product and experience, marketing and selling to non-ICP, people who aren't in your ICP. Product market fit isn't there yet. You're not aligned there quite yet. Incomplete information transfer, right? That's where maybe sales isn't able to give you all the nuance of everything. You know, maybe they have 10 different conversations and they can't fit that all into, you know, HubSpot or Salesforce. Incomplete relationship transfer. Do you have that set up? Do you have a kickoff call set up properly? Do you have introductions taking place? Right? These kinds of things sometimes can be missing. Or incomplete product. Now, this is something I've seen a lot in early stage startups. I've experienced it myself, where they are so busy building, one type of, functionality to the next and features and things, that they kind of just build an MVP and move on, build another part of it, MVP, move on. What happens is they leave a bunch of customer friction in the wake, right? And so then they can't, the customer can't fully use it. Sometimes human gaps fill that in, and sometimes that means like, oh, you can't run that report, but I can run it for you and I'll just email it to you. How often are CSMs emailing reports, right? Now, if you're doing that, that means it's broken. That means if that report could be exposed and made available to the customer if the product was finished, right? That's customer friction. How often do you want to stop and say, oh, I can't do this for myself. I'm going to call somebody or email somebody and wait to be able to do it, right? So that's a broken part of the product that isn't finished up. So think about those things. Any thoughts? Because I'm going to send you off to breakout session to discuss this stuff. I'm going to set you up with what the breakout session is. Anybody first want to discuss this painful topic that I've brought up for you?
Has anyone ever been successful in convincing sales to not sell to bad fit customers?
Yeah.
Nope.
How'd you do it?
No.
I showed him the numbers. What I did, here, I'll come off, stop sharing for a second. So what I did was I had the segments by, the customer-based segments, and I showed what the costs were versus what the revenue was, and I showed what the break-even point was. There was an enterprise customer base that was, they broke even in 10 months. We had mid-market that broke even in 14 months. And then we had SMBs that broke even in 18 months. And the non-ICP took 5 years, which is to say the company hadn't even been around for 5 years and they still weren't breaking even. And we were losing money on all of the non-ICP. So the CEO saw those numbers and said to marketing, are you even, trying to take out the non-ICP? How are they getting through? And like, why are they going through the SDRs? Why are they talking to them? AEs, why are you selling? And look, the non-ICP were the easiest, quickest ones to be, for the sales process. So the salespeople, like they're trying to make their quota, right? So they would sell to them in a pinch just to make their quota for the month, right? And no one told them they couldn't until the CEO put a stop to it. And the CEO put a stop to it because he saw he was going to go out of business if he didn't. So it's literally numbers.
Yeah. I love that because I'm happy to show somebody data and then tell them how it doesn't argue with them. But when you were talking about break even, were you talking break even in relation to CAC or CAC plus cost of support?
All the way through. So I took the whole customer base and did CAC, onboarding, any sort of tickets they had, everything. We came up, it took us about, because our data was really bad in the company, so it took us about 8 weeks to put it together, but we analyzed it for the whole year prior and said, okay, here we go. This is all of our customer base.
Awesome. Thanks, Jan.
And I didn't have to say a thing. I just said, here are your numbers. And I walked them through it. I didn't have to say, stop selling to your non-ICP. The CEO was the one who put his foot down. Any other thoughts or questions? All right. Then what I'm going to do, I will share my screen again. And also if you can put in the chat the links so everybody has the breakout session questions. But I want you to think about, as a customer, at what point in the journey, and this is if you're B2B especially, a lot of us are B2B, when have you lost trust in your own products that you've been using? Where could where could that go-to-market alignment have helped? Or in your company, where do your customers lose trust? What's the most critical point that you should address first? Who are the players involved? And what else could help? I've seen some people, if it's like the sales to CS handoff, they start to centralize just all the data because it's all been in mixed up places and things. Sometimes it's as simple as just pulling data together, right? So if you think about it, there can be some just basic steps you can take, right? But hopefully you're inspired because we have a lot at stake and we're losing money and we're losing customers. And if we can do some of these things, like take a look at where's the biggest fire in the room, right? Where's the biggest fire? What do you want to address? You ready? You inspired? All right. How many people? We got 54. So let me get a few breakout groups going. And we'll go off for 20 minutes and solve the problems of the world. All right. How did it go? I see a lot of notes in here. So it was a hot topic, right? What are some of the key things that, who wants to start sharing? Should we just go in order? Start with group one. Let's see, Andrew, Debbie, Garcia, Matt, Eric, Janet, Sarah. Somebody want to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Super interesting this. We saw some interesting trends. When we were frustrated about a customer experience, there was a lot of overlap with things that we normally see as CSMs. It's problems being kept, follow through, feature requests being followed up on, that kind of thing. And when we had things that were broken in our companies that needed to be fixed in the GTM side, a lot of it was not CSM. A lot of product alignment and sales targeting, marketing, things like that, engineering. So I thought that was interesting, but a lot of perception of the customer from customer point of view versus actual technical problems in our point of view. So kind of interesting stuff there for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's really hard too, right? Because, the product is evolving and, sales often wants to be able to say yes to the customer. And so then you can get a disconnect there, but that can be a real problem. How, as CSMs, can we or CS leaders bring that information back in and show that disconnect and the impact that it's having? Any thoughts on that? Did anybody?
One of the things that we talked about was at least on the kind of tail end of things is like capturing churn reasons for customers and being very discreet about capturing those churn reasons. So having very specified buckets and then associating revenue or volume of customers that has happened to, and trying to pull that back through and reflect that back upstream to kind of where some of that stuff may be coming from.
Yeah, it's just you won't be able to convince a business leader by just talking to them. Like, you're not just going to sell them on it, right? It's going to be accompanied by data, and that data has to be specific to the person you're talking to. So I love churn reasons. We use a vendor to capture them post-close for us. But yeah, you're going to have evidence.
Well, and that's the thing. If the data talks, you don't have to.
Yep. Just
like my example before we went to break, right? I didn't have to say anything to that CEO about stopping selling to the ICP, non-ICP, right? The money said it all. And if you have a lot of churn going out the door for, particular bucket reason, and you can put a dollar amount to that. You can put numbers to that. You can put logos to that. And that doesn't just speak to the CEO, that speaks to the investors too, right?
Yeah, Jan, I mean, we were talking about that in our breakout group because that first gate where we discover we've sold to a non-ICP is professional services, right at kickoff. I'm going to find out as soon as, kickoff, right?
Yeah.
And there were a number, of those experiences where we detected that very early on. And yes, we provided that feedback to the sales leader. Didn't go anywhere, didn't change anything. So just having that feedback loop back to sales, I think was not effective, and it's not something I would do again. So that's why I loved your idea about just get the data, take it directly to the CEO, and he or she is responsible for having that conversation with the sales team, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you're going to change that behavior.
Well, and also if you think about it, if you tell the individual salesperson who sold in the wrong customer, they've got a lot of skin in that game, right? Like that means they're losing out on, rent that month kind of thing, right? Like that's a big deal. So you tell them and they're like, oh, no, they're fine. They're going to be just fine. No, we can help them. That was a good sale because they're invested in making certain that was a good sale, even if it wasn't, right? So yeah,
but I think it's important because oftentimes you hear poor onboarding. Why doesn't make sure the poor onboarding isn't, aligned with the fact that it wasn't the right solution to sell them in the first place, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna get that on record, right? Because I'm not gonna have my team blamed for that. But there are cases where it is poor onboarding, and that's legitimate, and that's something we need to look into and fix. But if it has anything to do with product fit, product market fit, not the right solution, then I want to make sure that that's noted and that feedback is passed along.
Yeah. But it needs to look like more than just a one-off, or else it's sort of like, well, that happens. It can happen occasionally, but if it's happening as a trend, that's money. That's real money. The other thing too is I actually did work with a company where onboarding was just not organized, right? And so meanwhile, we had a marketing page that they'd been able to get a quote where somebody from years ago said, oh, it only took me 20 minutes. And then they were promising that for most people, it's going to take 14 days. But in fact, it was taking people 6 to 9 months. And when you have a 1-year contract and half or 3/4 of it was onboarding, you haven't really had a chance to get value, right? There's a lot of churn that happens with that too. So, take a look at where are your challenges. Now, Natasha, I know with professional services, you were buttoned up. So I'm not saying in your case.
When I first started there was a lot to fix on the onboarding.
Yeah. Well, there's always something to fix, but what is the hot button, right?
Yeah. And that's a good point, Jan, because, we had a highly configurable platform. So it could be a really simple use case that we could get in within 6 weeks, or it could be a long duration project up to 1.5 years, just depending on what that solution was. So if you had a long duration project like that, we had to make sure that we set up milestones throughout that onboarding journey where we could celebrate those quick wins, show incremental value, and get that and keep that enthusiasm and excitement up with our customers. We don't ever want that to die down or get killed during onboarding, because that's when you have a problem with the relationship, and that's when the CS team really needs to jump in and be proactive. So we did do that, and we had a number of we developed offerings around minimum viable product, get the product in, and then get the product in with a very simple use case, and then we can expand in future phases. But yeah, when I first started in that role, it was just project heroics, no standard methodology, inaccurate, the skill sets weren't up to par for the PMs that were, leading the projects. We had no sales to CS handoff. We were not getting any SOWs from the sales team at all. I had to fix that problem first before I could fix the back end, right? Because I can't expect my team to deliver if they're not getting an SOW. So yeah, there were a number of opportunities to resolve, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And then you have to prioritize too, right? The first thing you needed was a statement of work. So you knew that, and eventually you get to the other things. Justin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just making sure too that you have simple things, just your ducks in a row as well. As simple as a signed contract, and there's all these wonderful things. Well, I've had many people just say, hey, we're ready to go. We're ready to go. Why are we not moving forward? Well, we're waiting for the paperwork to be back. And you're doing paperwork chasing for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, even on the sales team to get to onboarding. And it's not even a mess. It's not even a master of, hey, so sometimes it's just the very simple things of getting a signed contract or whatever you need. I'm done. That was at least one of the biggest issues I had in my previous company.
And that's interesting too, because you can start to lose momentum, right? That if it's off with lawyers or off with, procurement or something, and the people who are really engaged and anxious for it, then, 3-4 weeks later, they're on to other things potentially. And they've got other, fires burning. And then you have to kind of go back and reignite and get them interested. Yeah, absolutely. What other, yeah?
I did see an interesting statistic from TSIA that the average time from contract close to staff a project for delivery is 18 days. Which could be a problem as well, because that could really demoralize a customer. If they're ready to go and they're having to wait, 18 days just to get to kick off.
Yeah. So looking at some of those times where, can you shorten some of those windows, and what can you do in the sales process to get people ready, right? Some of those things might be useful. If you see that, you're really kind of looking for customer friction points, right? That's kind of what you're looking for, is where's the most friction? What does that create in terms of the drop off and that sort of thing? What other things came up? We heard from, let's see, Brittany, Nikki, Mohammed, Ty, Justin. Well, Justin, were you sharing from the group, or was that just a comment? You're on mute. Yeah.
That was just a comment.
Okay.
So,
well, do you want to maybe speak up on what happened in group 2?
Yeah. So we were just talking a lot with group 2, just being able to convey the message to the fullest extent. So I know that there was a couple of different examples of when we were just making sure that, hey, you want to make sure that you actually provide everything and out there to the exact customer that you're trying to meet up with. As we were saying, onboarding is the number one thing where you lose customers. So if it's not a good onboarding, then you don't showcase your values as much. So
yeah, onboarding really is the foundation of the relationship where you jump off. Yeah. What about Ryan, Kimberly, Lisa, Kevin, Magdalena? Anybody want to speak for group 3?
Sure. Yeah, I could speak up. Although, Ryan, did you have thoughts? I thought I heard somebody chiming in. Feel free, we can tag team it.
No, I was there late, so I can't speak too much. Yeah, I got my computer crashed.
Right.
I mean, we had a good talk. I mean, a lot of the same things, that people were talking about, like, the ideal customer profile, the sales handoff. I mean, one thing that I really liked was, I think it was Roberta that was talking about, that it's really important to have a clear line of sight to the customer value, and, ideally, products that are set up in that way where it's just really, really clear how everything that is in the product relates to that, where, and it's a little bit more kind of garbled and harder to identify, that can make things more challenging. And then one thing that I brought up, which I stand by, I've been really thinking a lot more nowadays about, aligning data. You kind of mentioned it earlier before the break, Jan, and kind of said it's, an easy thing to do is to kind of align the data so everybody has all the information. And I was chuckling and thinking, like, I don't actually think that's always that easy of a thing to do. I think it's important. I mean, I know especially in higher ed, it's a huge challenge. I'm guessing in other organizations it is too, where you have multiple instances of Salesforce or, so I think of it both in terms of a change management piece and also in terms of the data, right? And so, like, some products, I was saying, can work well if just one small unit in a business is like, hey, we want to use Grammarly, like, we want to write better emails, yay. But there's a lot of other products where, the way you see it and the way it's sold to you is like, everybody's going to get this personalized journey, and, you're going to see all these metrics and this great, like, robust health score. And, the reality is, yeah, you'll get that if, like, everything that's feeding into it is coming from everywhere in your company, and everybody's, either talking to that system or feeding into and out of that system. And so I guess it really comes down to onboarding and just like setting the expectation to make sure that, when you're sure that this product is really going to penetrate in, that like you're aligned on your end. I mean, they're aligned on their end. Like you're going to go all in and it's really going to fully get in there, because otherwise you have this like tiny little Band-Aid that looks just like a shadow of what it, looked like on the shiny product demo commercial.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I've been thinking a lot about that.
That's where you start to deliver, right there in the onboarding.
Yeah, and like
Any other phases come up, or any other kinds of issues come up that we haven't already touched on? Just want to be sure that we sort of capture the ideas that have been included in the notes. Felicia, did you have something?
Yeah, I just thought of it now. Like we talked about trust, but there really has to be internal trust as well. So a lot of times everybody, sales won't trust the CS, or product won't trust. And really I say, like, I have to be the one that the customer comes to, right? And there's a mixed message going out to the customer. Come to me, I'm the one, the account executive. Come to me, I'm the one. And it's really not about who's more important. It's just it's about alignment and being in sync with your messaging, so that it's a one standardized front where here's the message we're giving you, and if there's an issue and you're coming to me, you're hearing the same thing, instead of you come to me and then you go to sales and you hear something else and you hear something else, like post onboarding. So I really think there has to be trust there, and to really work on that, I see that to be a key area to prioritize.
Yeah, absolutely. Building the trust with the customer, and building the trust internally across groups, really important and key in alignment. And that's the other thing I would say too, is that why it's so important to have that handoff from sales to CS and have that go smoothly, right? Because that's where you transfer the trust from the pre-sales motion into the post-sales motion, and you can start to do the delivery. And if you don't do that properly, and you don't have, where the CS team doesn't have a relationship with the executive buyers and the people who are involved, usually just in pre-sales, and then they're not usually the end users, they're not usually the people involved in onboarding, unless you're dealing with SMB. And so what happens though, is then when there's an escalation on the customer side and they escalate it up to the executive buyer goes back to who they know. And that's sales, right? That's the AE. So then when there's an escalation, they bring the AE back in, who's completely divorced from the account at this point, because they're off doing the hunting, they're doing more sales, right? So the way that you can tell is that you haven't had a successful sales to CS handoff is when the escalations keep going back over to sales. And so that's how you know that's something you need to fix, right? And so it's those types of things where you look at that friction, those pain points, that can help you identify, oh, wait, we need to fix this here. And that's really then, if you start to think about it, where you can show what it's costing the company, what it's costing the customer, how you can all get aligned and what that North Star is, then that's the way you can start to build that trust and say, no, we both want the same thing. You don't want to be bothered by this. I don't want to bother you with this. Let's do better handoffs, so you never have to worry about the customer again. Just go sell, just go make your rent, and it's a win-win for everybody. And then they'll be more engaged and more interested in doing that successful handoff and doing that kickoff call with you, so that then they can move on and they can celebrate and say, you're good, goodbye.
Yeah,
Right?
Dan, I mean, when I had to put together that formal sales to CS handoff process that didn't exist. I mean, one of my selling points of the sales team is, listen, first of all, it's a terrible experience for the customer when the delivery team is asking questions that have already been addressed in the sales cycle, right? It just makes it look like, the right hand's not talking to the left. But also, the more information we get, the more informed we are as a delivery team It just gives us credibility immediately because we can go into that kickoff and we can go bam, bam, bam. This is what you purchased, this is why you purchased, and this is how our solution is going to solve. And oh, by the way, we might have identified some metrics, measure outcomes that were identified in the customer success plan. Here they are. And then you find out what in the actual onboarding cycle, you integrate those celebrations and those outcomes. But if you do it that way and you just kind of get all that information off your plate to the CS function, then it definitely will minimize, minimize you having to get involved. I mean, there will be occasions.
It's a win-win. It's an absolute win-win.
Yeah, focus on selling. We're trying to help you focus just on selling.
Good. Well, great. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you today. We've gone a little over, but I was happy to be back with you. And next week we're meeting early next week. It's Halloween. It's October 31st. We're meeting at 9 a.m. We've got Ezra Zimbler, who's joining from Ireland. So it's his 4 p.m. It's 9 a.m. Pacific. It's noon Eastern. Okay, so just keep that in mind that it's totally different time next week. All right, excellent. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Everyone,
great to see you.
Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of SuccessHour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.